Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're looking at something that honestly, if I just slid this across the table to you, you would probably just use it as a coaster.
Oh, absolutely. It looks completely unremarkable.
Right. I mean, we are talking about a document titled E3.1 Project Management, and it looks like the absolute definition of standard, sterile corporate paperwork.
Oh, yeah. It's
A,
got the revision numbers, the approval
a
signatures.
very specific, dry font.
Yeah.
Honestly, it looks like something designed specifically to put you to sleep. But looking through the research we have pulled together for this, you're telling me this is actually the invisible nervous system for billion-dollar engineering projects.
It absolutely is. And, I get the reaction. On the surface, it really just looks like a checklist for bureaucrats.
Yeah.
But if you strip away the formatting, this document is, well, it's a masterclass in control. It is the architecture that prevents a massive infrastructure project. We're talking power plants, suspension
Yeah.
bridges, refineries from collapsing into just absolute chaos.
So it's not a building guide.
Exactly. This isn't about how to pour concrete or how to weld a high-pressure pipe. This is the employer requirement document.
Employer requirement.
Okay. It's the instruction manual from the employer, the people with the money, to the contractor, the people doing the work. And it effectively says, if you want to survive this project, and more importantly, if you want us to actually write you a check, this is exactly how you have to behave.
Behave. Behave is such an interesting word choice there. It sounds almost parental. Like, clean your room before you go out.
In a way, it is kind of parental. You have to understand the dynamic here. The employer has the money. The contractor has the labor, the cranes, the equipment. But the employer is terrified.
Terrified of what?
They are terrified that the contractor is going to take shortcuts, hide problems, or just lose track of the millions of details. So
Okay.
document E3.1 is the employer basically saying, I don't trust you to stay organized on your own. So you will organize yourself exactly the way I tell you to.
Wow. Okay, that sets the stage perfectly.
Yeah.
So our mission today for you listening is to decode this thing. We are going to see how the big players organize chaos. Because whether you are managing a huge construction site or just trying to keep a small remote team from falling apart, there is a lot of hidden wisdom in these dry paragraphs.
There really is.
So where does a document like this even start? What is the foundation?
We have to start with the brain of the operation. In the text, this is section 2. It's called the Project Execution Plan, or the PE.
The PPE. Okay, what is the PEP exactly?
Think of it as the constitution of the project. The document actually calls it the execution roadmap. But here is the catch, and this is where most people get tripped up. It is not something the contractor can just make up as they go along.
Right.
There is a ticking clock attached to this. The requirement states that the final PE must be submitted for review and approval no later than 30 days after the commencement date.
Wait, 30 days?
30 days.
That feels incredibly aggressive. I mean, if you were building a massive chemical plant, surely you need more than a month to figure out the entire game plan.
You would think so, right. But that tight deadline is the first test. It's a stress test.
Oh,
The employer is asking, can you mobilize your planning team fast enough to tell me how you're going to work? And notice what the PEP has to cover. It isn't just a schedule of, we will build the east wall on Tuesday.
Right, it's bigger than that.
Much bigger. It has to detail the organization, the processes, the temporary facilities, the IT systems. It is the comprehensive how of the entire job.
So it's not what we are building, it's how we are functioning.
Exactly. And here is the kicker. This is the financial hook that makes this document so powerful.
I saw this in the notes. This is the no plan, no money rule, right?
Yeah, precisely. The text explicitly says, for a PP deliverable to be valid for a payment milestone, it must be approved by the engineer. So picture this. You are the contractor. You can have excavators on site. You can have 1,000 guys ready to work. You can even be pouring concrete. But if this paper plan isn't signed off, the bank vault stays closed.
So you aren't getting paid for the concrete you're pouring.
Nope. You are funding the project out of your own pocket until you get that signature.
That shifts the power dynamic immediately.
Mm.
It implies that being good at building isn't enough.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be good at explaining how you are going to build.
It forces the contractor to be intellectual before they are physical. And it's a living document. The text says the contractor must control and maintain the PEP.
Meaning they can't just write it and file it away.
Right. If they want to change their strategy halfway through, say, they want to switch from using towering cranes to using a different lifting method, They can't just do it. They have to go back to the engineer, update the PEP, and get approval again. It effectively becomes the law of the project.
So the PEP is the law.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the enforcers of that law. Section 3 covers project organization and responsibilities. It asks for an org chart, which, standard corporate stuff.
Yeah.
But the specific roles they list, it felt like looking at a roster for a sports team where everyone plays very specific defensive position.
That is a great analogy. The employer isn't just asking, do you have people? They're asking, do you have the specific people to handle the specific disasters we are worried about?
Right. I picked out a few that seemed really significant. They explicitly ask for a risk manager.
Which is an admission right up front that things will go wrong.
Yeah.
We need someone whose entire job is to look for icebergs. They aren't there to build, they are there to worry. If you don't have a risk manager, you are just driving blind.
And then there is the interface manager. Now, in the tech world, that sounds like someone who manages software APIs. But in construction, that means something else entirely, doesn't it?
Oh, totally different. And honestly, this is probably the most critical role in the list. In big projects, the failure point is almost always at the seams.
The seams?
Think about it. You usually have multiple contractors. Imagine Contractor A is building a pipeline that runs 5 miles. Contractor B is building the storage tank that the pipe connects to.
Okay.
Contractor A is focused entirely on the pipe. Contractor B is focused entirely on the tank. If Contractor A builds the pipe 3 inches to the left and Contractor B builds the tank flange 3 inches to the right, you have a disaster. You have a pipe that goes nowhere.
And nobody realizes it until the day they try to bolt them together.
Exactly. And then you have a multi-million-dollar delay while everyone points fingers. The interface manager is the diplomat. They are responsible for making sure the different parts of the project actually fit together physically and technically.
So they're the ones constantly checking the seams.
Right. They walk between the camps saying, are you sure you're measuring from the same baseline? Are you using the same data?
That makes total sense. The fact that this document requires a dedicated manager just for interfaces really tells you how often these massive projects fail simply because things didn't line up.
It is the #1 cause of disputes. It wasn't my fault. His wall was in the wrong place. The interface manager exists to stop that argument before it starts.
Then you have the permits coordinator, which just screams bureaucracy management.
Essential, though. You can't build if you don't have the government's permission. If you ignore that, the police show up and shut down your site.
True. And then there's the HSE manager, health, safety, and environment. That's for liability, obviously.
Liability and keeping people alive. And also the OEM integration engineer.
Handling the original equipment manufacturers.
Right, making sure the giant, complex turbines or pumps actually work with the rest of the plant. And notice the requirement at the end of that section. CVs of Contractors personnel shall be submitted to the engineer upon request.
They want to see the resumes.
They want to see the resumes. They want to know exactly who is driving the bus. It prevents the bait and switch.
The bait and switch.
It's a classic contractor move. A contractor wins the bid by promising their A-team, superstar engineers with 30 years of experience.
Right.
But once the contract is signed, those superstars go off to pitch the next bid, and the project gets stuck with the junior team, the fresh graduates.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. This clause says, no, we check the IDs. If you promised us John Smith the expert, we want to see John Smith on site.
Okay, so we have the plan, the PP, and the people, the org chart. Now let's talk about the rhythm. Section 4 is all about meetings. And I have to say, for a technical document, it gets surprisingly specific about the vibes or the psychology of the project.
You were looking at the kickoff meeting.
Yes. Section 4.1. It requires a joint project kickoff and team building session within 30 days. It explicitly mentions team building. That feels surprisingly soft for a hardcore construction contract.
It does, but it serves a very hard purpose. The document says the goal is to establish common project targets and value drivers.
Value drivers, that sounds like pure corporate speak.
It is, but decode it.
Yeah.
It means they want to sit down before the stress starts and agree on what winning looks like. Is winning speed? Is it safety? Is it staying strictly under budget? Because those things often conflict. If you want extreme speed, safety might suffer.
That makes sense.
They are trying to merge the cultures of the employer and the contractor. Because once the work starts, it's going to be a battle. They need some foundational trust or at least a shared vocabulary before the bullets start flying.
And speaking of battles, the main battleground seems to be the monthly progress meeting. This is section 4.2.
Yes. The most important ritual on the project.
I noticed the location requirement. It says it is held at the engineer's premises.
Home court advantage.
It really is. You come to us.
It's a power move, but it's also practical. And look at the timing. It has to happen within 5 days of the monthly report submission.
5 days.
Right. So the sequence is you send in your massive report, the engineer reads it, finds all the problems, highlights all the errors, and then 5 days later you have to sit in their office and explain yourself.
And the agenda listed here is rigid. It is not a casual chat over coffee.
Not at all.
Yeah.
It covers standard stuff like engineering and procurement, but look at the friction points. Delays and recovery plans. NCRs, that's non-conformance reports, which is fancy talk for things you built wrong. And claim status.
Claim status. That is where the money fights happen.
That is exactly where the money fights happen. I want more money because you delayed me. No, you delayed yourself. That all happens in this meeting. It is a high-pressure environment where the contractor is held accountable for every single line item. It is basically a monthly trial.
And it's not just one big meeting either. Section 4.5 lists a whole ecosystem of meetings. You've got AAZ and HEOP, which sounds like a sci-fi villain duo, by the way.
Yeah. Hazard identification and hazard and operability studies. This is where you sit in a room with the smartest engineers and you imagine every possible way the facility could blow up, leak, fail, or kill someone. And then you design against it. It's structured paranoia.
Structured paranoia. I like that. And then there are FATs and SATs.
Factory acceptance tests and site acceptance tests. This is the principle of trust but verify. Before you ship a giant turbine to the site, you test it at the factory. That's the FAT. Because if it doesn't work, you want to know while it's still at the factory, not when it's sitting in the middle of a desert.
All right.
Then you ship it, install it, and test it again at the site. That's the SAT.
Yeah.
The document ensures you don't install broken equipment.
And then, just to make sure everyone is paying attention, a quarterly senior management meeting. The sponsors.
That is when the big bosses fly in, the vice presidents. If you are the project manager, you do not want problems escalating to that meeting.
Why not?
Because that meeting is designed for shaking hands, drinking coffee, and saying good job. If operational errors or petty fights get to that table, it means the project management has failed. It is the nuclear option.
So meetings drive the rhythm, but data drives the meetings. This brings us to Section 5, the monthly progress reports. The deadline here is tight, 7 days after the end of the month.
7 days. Think about that for a second. You have potentially thousands of workers, subcontractors, suppliers, shipping manifests, design changes. You have 7 days to compile all that data into a single coherent report. It is a massive data dump.
And it's not just a narrative, right? They don't want a story, they want the registers.
The registers are the truth tellers. If the narrative is the spin, the registers are the hard evidence. The document demands a variation register that's changes to the scope. A claims register demands for extra money. An NCR register the list of quality failures.
This feels like a report card of problems.
It is, but it's also a legal shield. This is key. If you have a problem, say, a delay caused by unexpected rain, and you don't put it in the register, legally in many contracts, it might as well not have happened.
Really?
Oh, yeah. If you try to claim money for it 6 months later, the employer can just say, it wasn't in the monthly report, so it didn't exist.
So it forces the contractor to show their hand every single month. You can't hoard your problems.
Exactly. And the document explicitly requires a section on areas of concern. You are contractually obligated to list your problems and your planned corrective actions.
Wow.
You cannot hide bad news. If you hide it, you are in breach of contract. This forces a level of transparency that is very uncomfortable but absolutely necessary.
It also mentions specific visuals, actual CBS, dashboard reports, and S-curves. Can you explain the S-curve? I see that term all the time in these documents, but I've never really grasped why it is so vital.
Sure. An S-curve is just a line graph tracking cumulative progress over time. It usually looks like an S. A slow start at the bottom, a steep climb in the middle during peak construction when everyone is working, and then flattening out at the top when you are finishing up.
Why is it so important to have that visual?
Because the shape tells the story instantly. If you are halfway through the project timeline, but your S-curve is still flat, meaning you haven't spent the money or done the work, everyone in the room knows you are in trouble just by glancing at the wall.
You can't hide it.
No. You can't talk your way out of a bad S-curve. It is the heartbeat monitor of the project.
So the report exposes the reality. But what I found really fascinating, and frankly the most complex part of this whole document, was Section 6, the integrated model. This felt like we were entering the Matrix.
This is the nervous system I mentioned earlier. This is where modern project management gets incredibly sophisticated. The engineer requires an integrated model consisting of WBS, PBS, and MDR.
Okay, let's unpack the acronym SOUP. Start with WBS.
Work breakdown structure. This is breaking the project down by actions. Pour foundation, install pipe, paint wall. It is the what are we doing?
Okay, what we are doing, and PBS.
Product breakdown structure. This is breaking the project down by physical assets. The pump, the wall, the roof, the electrical cabinet. It is the what are we building?
Actions and assets.
And MDR.
Master document register. The list of every single piece of paper drawings, manuals, certificates, inspection reports needed for the project. Okay, so we have actions, objects, and documents. The source material says they must be linked. Why is that linkage so heavily emphasized?
That is the crucial insight of this whole system. In the old days, you might have a schedule for construction and a completely separate list of drawings. They didn't talk to each other.
Right.
This document says, no. Every line item in your schedule, the WBS, must be tied to a specific physical asset, the PBS, and it must be tied to a specific document, the MDR.
Can you give me a real-world example of why that actually matters?
Sure. Let's say you are building a house. The WBS action is install front door. The PBS object is the front door. The MDR document is the key handover form.
Okay.
If you tell me I am 100% done with the install front door action, but you don't have the key handover form linked to it in the system, I know you are lying, or at least I know you aren't completely finished.
It prevents fake progress.
Exactly. A contractor might say, we are 50% done with engineering. But if you ask, okay, show me the approved drawings for the water pump system, and they can't produce the document because it is not linked in the schedule, then the progress isn't real. It connects the activity directly to the evidence.
There is a line here about metadata, too. It says the metadata must identify if a document is tied to a specific payment milestone.
That prevents the contractor from doing easy, low-value work just to look busy.
Picking the low-hanging fruit.
Right. The system forces them to focus on the work that actually triggers payment. It aligns their selfish incentive getting paid with the project's goal, getting the important stuff done.
Speaking of getting paid, let's talk about the carrot. Section 7, this table of PP deliverables. We talked about the PP at the very beginning, but this section lays out exactly what you need to hand over to unlock payment milestone M1.
M1 is the gatekeeper. Usually in standard construction contracts, you get a mobilization payment just to get started.
Right, to buy trucks and stuff.
Exactly. But here, they're saying, to get that first major chunk of real money, you don't just need to start digging holes, you need to submit the paperwork.
And the list is exhaustive. HSE management plan, quality assurance plan, risk register, procurement plan.
Cost breakdown structure, system integration plan, it just goes on and on.
What is the strategy here? Why force them to write all this before they really get going? Isn't it just massive red tape?
The employer is buying certainty before they buy construction. They are saying, I refuse to pay you to build this until you prove to me that you have a plan for risk, a plan for safety, and a precise plan for how you are going to spend my money.
It is basically show your work before you give the answer.
Precisely. If you let a contractor build without these plans, you end up with a building that might stand up, sure, but you have no idea how much it actually costs, you have no safety records, and you don't know how to maintain it. M1 ensures the foundation of the project is solid, not just the physical foundation of the building.
It is really a massive exercise in discipline.
It is, and it is painful for the contractor. No engineer likes writing a quality assurance plan.
Yeah.
They want to design beams, they want to pour concrete, but this document forces them to do the homework.
So bringing this all together, we started with a really dry PDF E3.1. But what we found is a machine designed to force communication and enforce honesty.
That is the key summary right there. It forces communication through those rigid meetings. It enforces honesty through the reporting registers where you literally have to list your failures. And it ensures planning by locking the money behind the PEP and milestone M1.
It transforms a chaotic construction site into a data-driven machine.
Without this document or something very much like it, you don't have a project. You just have a bunch of people standing in a field arguing with each other. This document is the definition of professionalism in engineering. It is boring, yes, but it is the kind of boring that keeps bridges from falling down and budgets from vanishing into thin air.
I think that is the big takeaway for me. We often think of engineering as just the math and the physics, but the administration, the contracts, the interface management, that is the glue that actually holds the math together.
Absolutely.
You know, before we wrap up, I want to leave you, our listeners, with a thought. We talked a lot about the interface manager and that integrated model. In our own lives or our small personal projects, we are usually pretty good at the WBS, the to-do list. We know the tasks.
Right. We know we need to go to the gym, buy groceries, finish the quarterly report.
But we often forget the interfaces. We forget how the different parts of our life actually connect to each other. We forget to check if the pipe meets the wall. Or we do the work but forget to document it, so we don't really know if we are making progress.
Or we chase the easy tasks instead of our own payment milestones.
Exactly. So here is the question to mull over. What if we ran our personal goals with the rigor of payment milestone M1? What if we refused to reward ourselves, refused to pay ourselves until we actually had a plan for the risks and the resources? It is a terrifying thought, maybe, but it might just be the secret.
If you're interested in the templates, please visit our shop. The link is in the description.
Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and see next time.